We want to do a coordinated global day of actions, so we're going to organize that. Now, who are your representatives in Congress? Okay, so one of them.
Has anyone seen the video of Debbie Wasserman Schultz called the cops on Medea and 5 cop cars came to our house?
I was accused of physically assaulting Debbie Wasserman Schultz. In any case, you might have heard Marco Rubio's response to this. Boo. He was, I think, the first senator after Lindsey Graham who responded to this, and his response was horrific, saying how great it was that Soleimani had been killed, that this was important for the United States, that this was a good thing, that Donald Trump was right. So Marco Rubio needs to hear from all of us, right? So call the office all the time, the local office and the DC office. Marco Rubio is one of the worst warmongers that we have in Congress.
Fuck that guy! And he wasn't even notified. But that's okay.
Yeah. So the other is then you have Debbie Wasserman Schultz, and you know we have these Democrats who you cannot trust when it comes to these kind of issues. Because they say, oh, we want to be notified, we want hearings, we want to hear more about it. And they want to be able to vote on it. But you know what? I'm a little worried that if they get a chance to vote on it, they vote for war, right? That's why they have to hear from us and hear from us quickly to say that this is atrocious. That Donald Trump taking us out of the nuclear deal in 2018 was the root of this crisis. That this is a crisis manufactured by Donald Trump. And that the assassination of an Iranian leader is going to bring down such a response that we have no idea where and when it will happen, but we know it's going to be bad. And we know then Trump is going to say, okay, now we got to respond, and it'll be a horrendous cycle of violence.
Hi everybody, my name is Noor. I am Iraqi, and I just wanted to say I know that protest culture isn't huge in America, but I really appreciate everyone showing out, because obviously protesting and calling our representatives is all that we can do. Thank you. I wanted to add that it wasn't like a $1 trillion war, it's a $3 trillion imperialist occupation, and that the war would be fought on Iraqi soil. That's not okay. That's just what I wanted to clear up. We know where it's going to happen. We know Iraqi children and Iraqi families are going to be the ones who suffer like the brunt of everything, and we just can't let that happen. I have family there, and that's all I can say for now.
Thank you for being here. And wait, let me ask you something. When they show in some of the media a handful of Rockies that are celebrating the assassination of Soleimani, can you respond to that?
I think people need to realize just because a man was bad doesn't mean that the way he was assassinated can't be criticized. No matter what, Trump shouldn't be sending out airstrikes. Sure, Soleimani was part of like ethnic cleansing and everything, but I think people need to realize that the Iraqi and the Iranian people should have been the ones to take him out, and not American intervention. And we can't have this act of war escalate into war. We need to stop that while we can. So.
And this is not really about taking out people, because that's not the way we bring peace in the world. Now, it's a lot of sun right here. Should we move over to the shade where the tree is and talk about what we can do to build this movement here? Why don't we do that? Great. Thank you. Let's go under the tree. Okay, that's too much. So you know, we did ask the media when was a good time for this protest. They were the ones that wanted it in the middle of the hot sun. Yeah. So why don't we all circle around here? This is much, much nicer. And we can hear from some people who want to talk. And we can talk about how we're going to build this movement. Can we fill in a little bit here so we can see each other? And get some more folks in here. And we do have a sign-up sheet. Does anybody know where it is? We'll pass it around. Because the important thing is to really build this movement. And this is the first of what, unfortunately, are going to have to be many protests, not just in the street, but in the offices, and I would dare say, at the homes of some of our, quote, representatives who don't represent us very well, right? Yes! Okay, so we have somebody here with us who, I'm really glad we had a woman from Iraq, and maybe you will say some more things about how this will affect Iraq. But we do also have an author who wrote a book on Iraq, and has written a lot about this last episode. And you are lucky to have him living here in Miami, and that is Sandy Davis. So let's give him a hand and hear from Sandy.
Hello, everybody. So, yeah, here we go again. It's, if we don't put a stop to these wars, then they just keep going on, and there's always a new one. And, this is not what most Americans want. We all know that. But, in a sense, this is like 1984, where there's always a war somewhere going on in the background, and people can't even remember who we're fighting, this year. And they don't really know the details because the media will talk about everything else but that. I think the best thing I can do is just to fill in a couple of points that the media are not talking about when they talk about the U.S. assassination of Soleimani and the U.S. airstrikes against Kataib. So one thing they don't mention is that in July and August, the U.S. has had 5 to 10,000 troops in Iraq now for quite a while. They were kicked out in 2011, but they got back in 2014 on the pretext of fighting Islamic State, which was spawned by the U.S. covert war in Syria, when some of the so-called moderate rebels that the U.S. supported, became dominated by Al-Qaeda-linked groups, and then one of them seized Raqqa and set up what they called the Islamic State. They then took over the second largest city in Iraq, Mosul. So this became the pretext for the U.S. to get its troops back into Iraq. Now, there was no real fighting between U.S. and Iraqi forces until in July and August, the U.S. allowed its bases in Iraq and Syria to be used by Israel to conduct drone strikes against, guess who? Kataib Hezbollah. Okay? That led to the Iraqi government restricting U.S. use of Iraqi airspace, and it led to a major push for the Iraqi government to once again kick out the U.S. troops. When that didn't happen, in October began a new series of rocket and mortar attacks on the U.S. bases, which the U.S. has blamed on Kataib Hezbollah. They have not accepted responsibility for it, so that is just an accusation on the part of the U.S. And so those rocket and mortar attacks continued from the end of October into December, and in December they escalated. There were more of them, and eventually one U.S. contractor was killed. Now, one thing that we should always notice about, U.S. and Western and Israeli responses to any sort of violence by their enemies, and that is there is always just a horrific, disproportionate response. And so the U.S. then launched these airstrikes that killed at least 24 people, mostly members of Kataib Hezbollah, in 4 or 5 different places around Iraq. But of course, when we hear about this in the US media, of course, this is all completely unprovoked. They never mention the Israeli drone strikes, and they never mention, just how unpopular the US presence in Iraq still is. The US destroyed Iraq. My book about the war is titled Blood on Our Hands, the US Invasion and Destruction of Iraq. We destroyed that society, and it is still ruled today by Western-backed puppets who were flown in, and that was according to the New York Times. They were flown in at the same time as the US invasion and occupation forces. So they are part of what destroyed their own country. They do not deserve to be sitting in the green zone, running the country and pocketing the country's oil wealth. At the time of the invasion, an Iraqi taxi driver in Baghdad said that what he was afraid of was exiles coming back to Iraq with empty pockets to fill. And this is who the US brought with it back to Iraq, was exiles with empty pockets ready to fill. And they have been doing it now for, 16, 17 years. And this is why the people of Iraq are back in the street protesting since all through October and November, even as over 400 of them have been massacred. Some of them by these, Iranian-backed Shiite militias. But many of the people protesting are Shiites too. This is the people of Iraq rising up to say, no more rule by Iran, no more rule by the US, no more rule by this corrupt government that the US invasion installed. So that is, that's the reality of what we're dealing with here.
Thank you, Cindy.
Hey guys, my name is Cassia. I'm with People's Opposition to War, Imperialism, and Racism. Thank you again for giving us a wanted to do a few chants with you, and then we can get through to a few more of our speakers. I heard you guys were chanting. We were late because of parking in Miami, as it were. So we got, about 50 people here. And this is a very last minute gathering, right? An emergency gathering. This is really
I need you to hold this, make sure we're good. I need you to hold this, make sure we're good. Get a little bit closer. All right, look. Good. What's up, everybody? I'm here at the Miami protest against escalations of tensions with Iran. I have a very special guest who is here for the same reason that I'm here. I mean, partially the Iran conflict, but also it's really cold up north. Medea Benjamin is with us today. I have to, thank you for everything that you've done so far. Obviously I follow you on Twitter, I read a lot about you. I was actually a cheerleader for you when you were going through that thing with Debbie Washington Schultz. Not a fan of Debbie either. She's had some things done to me as well. So first, thank you. And second, what is your take on this entire ordeal? One, there seems to be one side, obviously the Republicans, who are cheering for this, right? And have been a lot of the same voices that have been cheering for this for years. But on the other side, me personally, I'm seeing a lot of indifference, not enough action, preventative action from the Democrats on the left that are in Congress with the power to do something. What's your take?
My concern is that a lot of their complaints are that they weren't consulted beforehand. And that they want a chance to hear more about it and perhaps even vote on it. But I worry that if they get a chance to vote on it, they'll vote yes. Because there are so many precedents where Congress just bows down, especially when you're in the middle of attacks, and there will be attacks from Iran, and then it's going to be harder and harder for our representatives to say we got to stop this. So that's why it's so important that we build up a real grassroots movement so that we can pressure on our elected officials.
I mean, what do you honestly believe the odds are of them voting against war after this is the same legislature that voted to give Trump more money than he asked for?
I think it depends on us. You know, you can look back, I think it was in 2013 when Obama was in power and he said that Syria had crossed the red line using chemical weapons and that he was going to respond by military attacks. And because they took it to their parliament in the UK, he said, all right, you take it to the Congress here. And we came out from the left and the right saying, no, 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 and stopped Obama from getting us involved in that time. So I think we can stop him.
You know, I'm glad that you mentioned that. I think that you would probably agree. Bombing 7 countries, clearly Obama wasn't the peace president.
Right.
But I think that actually speaks more to the proof that if we get active, if we do things like what we're doing here today, even those who stand to profit from the war, those who are in power because of the promises they made and their popularity and their mandate, they will still rebuke those who are trying to profit if we come out and speak, and it could cost them their office, their power, et cetera, et cetera. My next question is, do you think that there is a clear pattern from what we've seen here in Iran, not even a few, I mean really the last 2 to 3 years in Syria, what we've seen in Venezuela?
Can we stop for 1 second?
Yeah, go ahead. But he's going to give somebody a hug. But what Medea actually just talked about was 100% true. It's something that I've preached about over and over again. At the end of the day, you cannot do anything. You can honestly not do anything, and you can just accept that this is the way things are, and that innocent lives are going to be taken for, you know, without a fight, basically. But what we have seen historically is that even those whose self-interest differ from these protests, from the self-interest of activists, they know that it takes one news article to go viral, one demonstration such as this to go viral. It takes one instance like this to cost you your office, cost you your donors, cost you your mandate. And so that is why it's so important for people to get together like what we are seeing here today and hold these protests. I'm going to be speaking soon, by the way, but okay, he is back. But yeah, what I was just asking is, have you seen a pattern between Iran, Syria, obviously Iraq, Venezuela even, where it seems like we supposedly care about human rights atrocities, and we use that as a reason to attack these nations, to destabilize them, and yet we have Saudi Arabia right here in our face committing open atrocities, but for some reason we see them as an ally. Do you see a pattern there?
Absolutely. It's all about, we want governments that are open to U.S. corporate interests. And the U.S. has a very cozy deal with Saudi Arabia, mostly Saudi Arabia using their vast petrodollars to buy U.S. weapons, many billions of dollars of U.S. weapons. And in addition to that, we have cozy relationships with the very repressive government of Israel. And with repressive governments like the Egyptian one that came to power through a coup and put 40,000 people in prison. So the U.S. has no problem dealing with repressive governments when they're open to U.S. corporate interests.
Yeah, that's what it's beginning to seem like. I mean, it seemed like that for quite some time, but I think with the abundance of information that we have at our disposal, we can start to see those clear patterns formulating. Now, I don't know if you're aware of this. Did you know that Iran just found 53 or so billion barrels worth of crude oil in November? Literally just happened. And I'm sure you also knew that even though Trump now classifies him and his military as a terrorist organization, did you know that NBC in 2015, just 4 years ago, said that Soleimani was actually the one who was the leading force against ISIS in the region. So now we're starting to see a pattern of those who have been considered worldwide as leaders against terrorist organizations. It seems like those are the ones we're more concerned about taking out than the actual terrorist organization.
Absolutely, and Soleimani was somebody who the U.S. was working with back in to try to overthrow the Taliban in 2001.
Yep.
And Soleimani was the Quds force was the one that were fighting against Al Qaeda, Al Nusra, and ISIS. They've always been against the Sunni extremists.
Yeah.
So yes.
So how can they rationalize? I just don't understand. How can they
Because the American
rationalize?
people don't know about this stuff, and so they just lie, and they say that Soleimani was responsible for the deaths of hundreds of U.S. soldiers. You know who's responsible for the death of hundreds of U.S. soldiers? No, thousands of U.S. soldiers. George Bush, for
Yes.
sending them into Iraq in the first place on the basis of lies.
Afghanistan.
If anybody should be held accountable, it should be George Bush.
And I would even go venture to say, once again, we didn't find Osama bin Laden in Afghanistan. Obviously, we didn't find him in Iraq. We found him in Pakistan. So we knew for a fact that he was Saudi Arabian. We knew he was Saudi Arabian royalty. We also knew for a fact, because Pakistan's braggadocious about it, that they house terrorists all the time. Yet, not one time out of the chicken hawk's mouths have you ever heard, we have to go to Pakistan to get him.
On the contrary, the U.S. gives hundreds of millions of dollars to Pakistan every year.
Absolutely, it's sad. So, thank you very much.
Well, thank
I
you.
appreciate you, one,
So good
organizing
talking to
this.
you.
Yeah, it was a pleasure meeting you in person. And keep up this great work, and hope you keep documenting. Thank you. So that was Medea Benjamin of Code Pink, everybody. We're going to go back to this protest, and I'll be speaking soon.
Indian troops to invade Venezuela and set up a complete naval blockade around it. The generals who ordered the murder of Soleimani had a plan on how to accomplish it that was already on the shelf. General's plan. And killing a general doesn't stop an army that's organized to implement the plans. If any of the potential targets of Washington's military plans carried out preventive actions in this manner against the U.S., I mean, we don't have any generals that are all that popular as far as I know. If anybody tried to do that, how do you think the United States government would react to that? Third comment, and my last one, is on the pious wringing of hands the other day when Iraqis surrounded the U.S. Embassy in Baghdad. The Miami Herald claims today, few images are more haunting to the collective American psyche than the sight of a U.S. diplomatic installation under siege somewhere in the world. Such attacks have been a watchword for trauma. Saigon, Tehran, Beirut, Nairobi, Benghazi. It makes you wonder why these embassies are so unpopular in the first place. What is the American embassy in Baghdad? A walled city within a walled zone. It comprises 104 acres with its own security force, its own power station, and its own water supply. It has housed up to as many as 16,000 people. What is it? It's an embassy established to organize the domination of the people and the oil of Iraq. Really a secret, parallel, unwelcome government, increasingly at odds with the will of the Iraqi people themselves. But the U.S. government wants us to believe that its embassy is a sacred place where crazed pro-Iranian Iraqis threaten to violate the sanctity of diplomatic space. How cynical. Consider the case of the embassy of the Bolivarian Republic of Venezuela in Washington, D.C. After continuously failing attempts to stage a coup against the government of Nicolas Maduro, Washington expelled Venezuela's diplomats from the U.S. with the plan to install agents of its failed puppet, Juan Guaido, inside the embassy. Guaido, who couldn't command so much as a police station in his own country, who was dependent on Yankee money as he calls for the invasion of his own country, who most likely will not even be re-elected to a seat in the National Assembly in tomorrow's elections in Venezuela. Guaido will be in charge of Venezuela's embassy. Such tactics are a complete violation of the 1961 Vienna Convention. Seeking to protect its rights under that treaty, the expelled diplomats of the Maduro government turned the keys to their property over to a group of anti-war activists, asking them to occupy and protect the premises from a mob of right-wing Venezuelans outside who intended to break in and make the embassy an outpost of the failed coup. Hence was formed the Embassy Protection Collective. These were 37 activists who continued their defense of the embassy for 37 days. May 16th, federal authorities arrested the 4 who remained inside, and now these 4 are facing charges of up to a year in prison and a $100,000 fine each. 2 of these defendants will be speaking in our area at 7:30 p.m. on January 18th at the Fort Lauderdale Unitarian Church. They are seeking political support and financial support for the legal expenses of their defense, which are expected to run up to $60,000. We urge you to make their struggle part of our struggle against the war policies of the U.S. government. Thank you.
So, what do we want? Peace with Iran? When do we want it? Now! What do we want?
Peace with Iran!
When do we want it?
Now!
What do we want?
Peace with Iran!
When do we want it?
Now!
What do we want?
Peace with Iran!
When do we want it?
Cassia!
So, is there anybody, raise your hand if you haven't signed up on the sign-up sheet. Okay, so who has the sign-up sheet?
Oh, I do.
Okay, can you raise your hand if you haven't signed up? Okay, we really need you to sign up because this is the beginning, unfortunately, of many protests that we're going to have to do because this isn't just going to end. This is a cycle of violence that is going to be very, very ugly. We also have to do things to pressure our elected officials. I'm sorry that your senator is Marco Rubio. And your other one is not much better. But that's what we got to work with. So we got to put pressure on the senators and say, stop the madman in the White House. And in the meantime, of course, we have to get that madman out of the White House, right? And put somebody in there who understands that the American people have said over and over and over again, we're sick and tired of these endless wars. And right now we have somebody here who represents a country that unfortunately has borne the brunt of the U.S. endless wars. I'm glad that we have young people here today, but you probably then don't remember when George Bush invaded Iraq and destroyed a country that was already suffering from a dictatorship and made it worse. And, you know, they said that they had to go in and take out Soleimani because he was responsible for the deaths of hundreds of Americans in the Middle East. Guess who was really responsible for the death of thousands of Americans in the Middle East? George Bush. George Bush for getting us into that war. And so we're really happy to have a wonderful young woman here from Iraq, and we want her to come up. It's Nadia Noor Al-Daimi. And so let's give a hand for Noor. She came all the way from Tampa to be with us today.
Hi everybody. I don't think I can represent Iraq. I think other Iraqi people can also represent themselves. it's a whole country. But I wanted to say, I mean, I haven't really prepared anything to talk about, but I was remembering Ilya Kaminsky's poem, and we lived happily during the war, and the biggest thing is that we can't live happily during this war. We have to protest, and I think that's how we get to the belly of the beast of imperialism. But I think also we need to like clear things up a bit. I don't think Bush is the only cause of like Iraq's destruction, because for the past 28 years, every single American president has called for the bombing of Iraq. We have to think about that. On top of that, I feel like when Clinton says something like we need to think about Iraq as a business opportunity, that needs to be condemned. We need to condemn not only our elected officials, but we also need to condemn the people that are voting for these elected officials. We need to fire up. But I also think that I have a bit of an issue with like kind of censoring the hypotheticality of Americans around this protest, because honestly I understand that thousands of American troops have died and that thousands more are getting deployed, but over 1 million Iraqis have died. And brown people are always going to be the ones who suffer the most during these times. The war won't be fought on American soil, it will be fought on Iraqi soil. And Iraqis themselves, for months now, since October, have been protesting, and they've been trying to regain their own sovereignty. And this is just another step in like the neoliberal chokehold that we can't get out of. And I think that the biggest thing right now is to realize, like, yes, we do have an impeached president assassinating a leader without congressional approval, but I mean, I also have issues with that too, because I mean, he wasn't a popular leader because he was obviously participating in ethnic cleansing. But U.S. intervention shouldn't be happening. America isn't in a place where it can be calling for and condemning any other international party, essentially. Thank you. My biggest thing also is that, again, I don't represent Iraq. I think we need to be listening to Iraqis as well, and Iraqi media, and seeing that, because I mean, I don't think, for example, like the New York Times has been the most transparent or the most favorable to our representation. Thank you.
This is a free speech zone. So, and speaking of free speech zone, if you do want to speak, Cassia, where are you? Where are you? Oh no, if people want to speak, they could come up and tell you, right? Yeah. So we have somebody who has asked to speak, and he is a journalist, but he's also a veteran. And we know that the Trump administration, after saying they were going to get us out of these wars, has just authorized first 750 troops and is now sending another 3,000 to the Middle East. So in addition to the Iraqis, the Syrians, the Iranians, the Lebanese, the others from the Middle East who are going to bear the brunt of this, it's also U.S. soldiers. So we want to hear from Niko House. Thank you for being here.
How's everybody doing? Good? First of all, I want to say thank you all so much for being out here. I know it's hot, but you could live in New York and be cold as hell right now, so I think we should count our blessings, right? I want to say thank you to the young Iraqi woman who just spoke, because she brought up something that I think doesn't get brought up enough, and it's something that probably angers me to tears sometimes. When these conflicts spark off, it is always the brown and black people of any given region, not just the Middle East. Even when we look at Venezuela, who are the primary people affected by our sanctions. The mestizos, the indigenous, the black people. We cannot forget who we are fighting for. Our troops, I'm a veteran. My brother is in the Navy right now. That 82nd Airborne that they just deployed, that was who I was a part of. It was a culture that I was raised in Fayetteville, North Carolina, and then went on to the military to become a part of. Some of these people I know. I don't want them to be put in harm's way, but at the end of the day, I know that they are the ones going to be pointing guns at innocent people. Right. And that is something I believe that we should absolutely highlight more often. Talk about our soldiers, but we need to really be putting emphasis on those who are down. because we went to Iraq for WMDs, didn't find any WMDs, but we somehow find hundreds of thousands of innocent Iraqi people to kill. Isn't that coincidental? Now, I want to say regarding this situation with Iran, this conflict with Iran, I've heard people claim to be, you know, they're against the war, but then they'll say, well, this general was evil and we know he was a terrorist, and we didn't ask for all that. It is not we're not here to judge. We're not God or whatever higher being you believe in. The fact of the matter is, why are they calling him evil? Why do they call Assad evil? Why do they call Maduro evil? Why do they call Gaddafi evil? Super weird. These people all lead countries that have a lot of oil. That's super weird, right? Everybody, just if you see more oil, you're evil now. But the truth of the matter is, the reason we cannot allow our arguments to be dictated by quote-unquote good and evil as far as individuals are concerned, especially when it comes to our media, especially when it comes to our government and our politicians, is because that is always the framework they use to go and take resources that do not belong to us. Understanding the manufacturing of consent is exactly how we will prevent the next war. Period, point blank. Whoever your favorite politician is, they have all misstepped. I don't care who it is. I'm a Tulsa supporter by the most anti-war you can get. She's misstepped in this. Bernie Sanders, I'm a Bernie Sanders supporter. He's misstepped in this. AOC has misstepped in this. We were talking about Venezuela and Maduro, for example. They've all done it. But you, as an activist, you, as an educated observer, have a responsibility to say, well, no. What is the evilness or lack thereof of this particular being who was elected by their own people, who is empowered by their own people, have to do with our involvement in someone else's country? That especially when they did not call for us to be there, we did not go to the United Nations, and then we did what we did yesterday or a couple of days ago, which is assassinate the second most powerful person in Iran, a sovereign government that has a sovereign military, and might I add, one of the largest militaries in the world. Strategically, it's stupid. But guess what? Even if strategically it was smart, it would still be wrong, and we should still be out here protesting. So until we genuinely understand the causes of these wars and the reasons for these wars, we won't ever get the result that we desire. It isn't just about being anti-war. You have to be more educated than the neoliberal and the neoconservative to your right and left, the neoliberals and the neoconservatives that you're engaged with on social media, in your schools, in your jobs. But of course, don't be angry at them. Be compassionate. Share, because that's how they also manufacture consent. They play on our emotions, they get us angry, and then we're angry that they got angry, so we're yelling at the people who are already angry, and then we just become combative and we get into an internal war in our country. No, we have to show the compassion that we are demanding our politicians and our leadership. You educate them. You educate yourself. You help them understand you don't have to call them evil if you're against the war. You should just be against the war, period. You don't have to demonize this person or this group of people. If you're against the war, you should be against the war, period. And then, and only then, until we understand that, and then once again, help people understand the end game, because I think it's pretty easy to distill what this is all about. It's about money. It's about oil. If you ever want to know, if you ever want to just tell like a Trump supporter who is like, because there's a lot of them out there that are a little bit blinded. They're blind witnesses right now, okay? They're like, oh, somebody actually attacked, funny story, somebody attacked Tulsi for being part of the CFR because she's against the war. And I was like, you have no idea how stupid that sounds, but okay. But in all seriousness, there are blind witnesses out there and they have their reasons for being that way. But guess what you just tell them? Man, if Trump cares so much about human rights atrocities, when we invaded Saudi Arabia? Yeah, we got a date for that? Anybody know we're invading Saudi Arabia? No? Too much oil. No, too much. Yeah, they got a lot of oil. But they don't got more oil than Iran. That's why they don't like them. Anybody know we're about to invade Israel? Does anybody know? Because there's still an apartheid there, right? There's still a genocide taking place as we speak. But we don't invade them. That's crazy. I know we care so much about human rights atrocities. At the end of the day, it's about the money. It is always about the money. And I'll leave you with this. I watched Avatar the other day, 2009. One of the best movies. I'm not talking about The Last Airbender, although that is an amazing series as well. But James Cameron's Avatar, and towards the end of the movie, when they're about to hit the climax of the story, he says, "This is it. This is what we always do. If somebody has something we want, we make them the enemy, so that we can justify attacking them and destroying them to take what they're sitting on." That is all it comes down to at the end of the day. And so demonstrations like this, your activism outside of here, what you're going to do when you go home, what you're going to do when you go back to school, all of this matters. They have something we want, but no matter what that is, we have to make the world know that we don't want it if it has to cost innocent lives, if it means going to war, if it means killing my brother and sister in arms, your brothers and sisters in Iraq. We don't want it. Nothing is worth that money. Nothing is worth that oil. We got a lot of students out here. Okay? So thank you all so very much for being here, and God bless.
Good point. Every war that we've ever gone into has only helped the billionaires, and not any of us sitting here today. So what do we say? No blood for oil, U.S. off Iraqi soil. 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 No blood. All right. U.S. off Iraqi soil. Honestly, we should be chanting as loud as we can and as often as we can those words, because everybody from Marco Rubio's office, Deborah Wasserman Schultz's office, Donald Trump's White House, they all need to hear us. And the people in Iraq and Iran need to hear us too. Next up, guys, I'd like to introduce Eric from Dream Defenders, an awesome organization doing a lot of really awesome stuff in South Florida, particularly for the Black and brown communities. Here you go, Eric.
Today we stand here against another war of imperialism, a war that have ravaged the global South, the nations of Black and brown people for decades, for centuries. Here in this illegitimate nation we call the United States, on settler land, the settler land. They murdered indigenous folks, and they continue to go abroad and murder other brown and Black folks across the world. They murdered them for resources. They have been for hundreds of years. This is another continuation of that. We must stay united and stay strong against any intervention, whether they call it military intervention or foreign aid abroad, specifically here at this moment with Iran and Iraq. The U.S. has violated nation sovereignties over and over again. These moments where we stand united in protest are not the only moments to stand against war. The moments become crucial when we tell people not to join the U.S. military, to not be an aid in murdering Black and brown children, Black and brown people, innocent or military, because every nation has the right to defend themselves from imperialism and colonialism. Right. So as we organize this protest and organize many more, we must remember that these protests are not the definitive actions that will lead to the end of wars here and abroad. Here against Black and brown folks through the carceral system, through U.S. imprisonment, through systems like ICE, and abroad through the military-industrial complex that has become a welfare state, coercing Black and brown folks to join and become murderers. The same murderers like Christopher Columbus. There are no ifs, ands, or buts. If you demand change, then you must bear arms against the bourgeois classes, against the rich classes. Those folks who create war as a racket. As said by the last 5-star military Marine, war is a racket. It's used to make money during times of crisis. They go there for oil and basic resources, and they don't give a fuck what happens to Black and brown folk. No ifs, ands, or buts. We must stand united at all times, organize not only protests, but organizing our schools to make sure our young children don't go to U.S. military, to make sure that the military is not viewed as something honorable, but something disgusting. Because how can you go to someone else's home, murder it and wreck it, and come back a hero? There are no excuses, whether you suffer a personal loss, which they will, if this war breaks out, which it looks like it's happening. There's no ifs, ands, or buts, or no excuses for murdering innocent people. There's no ifs, ands, or buts for murdering people who are defending themselves from a behemoth that is American imperialism.
All right, thank you. We just got 2 more speakers, guys. Next up is, let me get right, is Glory Jones, a student in California living in South Florida and self-proclaimed Tulsi supporter. Come on down.
Hi guys, so my views on this are pretty much kind of the same as Niko's, because like MCSC is one of 3 outlets I trust for foreign policy reporting. And I'm just glad to see everyone here today, only a couple blocks away from your future Eastern Conference champions, the Miami Heat. I like it. Yeah, I'm just really glad to see us all here because I'm young, but I'm still old enough to remember at least hearing and seeing in the news the massive Iraq protests, and I just wish we could bring those back. But instead having it being against simply one president or one Republican administration, have it be against the entire foreign policy establishment. Because the war crimes didn't start with Bush, and they didn't start with Obama, and they didn't start with Trump. It started way back, even further than the 50s when the CIA overthrew Iran's first prime minister. And it was the same foreign policy establishment which ruined Honduras, which ruined Haiti, which ruined Iraq, which turned our first black president into a corporate shill, which brought back open slave markets to Libya. So I just wish that we could hold someone like Neera Tanden, who's saying we should steal oil from Libya, accountable in the same way that we hold John Bolton accountable. I wish this wasn't such a partisan thing. I wish we could oppose the foreign policy establishment as a whole, because Democrat, Republican, Green Party, Libertarian, Independent, no matter who you are, at the end of the day, when we go to this war, Raytheon stocks are going to go up and Boeing stocks are going to go up, and our troops and poor black and brown people are going to suffer because of this. They're the only ones that bear the cost of war. They're the only ones that have their homes destroyed. They're the only ones that have their lives ruined because of economic sanctions, are, I believe, as an act of war as well. So I just wish we could protest the whole machine, and I'm so happy to see everyone here today, and I think we need to keep it up and just expand this movement into something even bigger, because we need to stick together, because people who actually do expose war crimes like Chelsea Manning and Julian Assange, they're in prison right now or being fined. Julian Assange is dying in prison, so we need to show solidarity for everybody. We need to unite and bring back a true anti-war movement that is focused on systemic upheaval rather than just one single person.
Hell yeah. Awesome. Give up for Glory, Joe. Yeah, I'd like to echo that a little bit. I just turned 30 this year. Well, last year, I guess. And it's crazy because for all of my adult, teenage to adult life, I've been protesting this war. It's the same ongoing war, no matter where it reaches its tentacles, right? It's all the same war. And in 2002, I was 12 years old, right? That's more than half my life now. And those of us, the millennials in the room, it's over half our lives now that we've been in this perpetual state of war. And I think it's about time that we say hell no to that. So I think I'm going to go ahead and end it with my good friend, Ty. Where are you, Ty? All right, Ty is like a long-time peace activist, anti-war activist, anti-imperialist activist, and overall badass. So please give it up.
So, just a couple of thoughts from listening to what's going on today. Cassie had just mentioned the word tentacles. We hear this constantly all day long on CNN. Tentacles of Iran. The United States has over 800, possibly 1,000 military bases worldwide. We've got bases in every single country. Who's got the damn tentacles? Is it Iran, who has no military bases outside of Iran? This is pathetic that we listen to these lies as Americans and we get caught in. I was just asked in an interview, you know, like, what's going on with this guy who got killed? And I'm going, like, clearly they assassinated him with a drone. And clearly assassination is against the law. It's against our law. It's against international law. This guy was a member of a foreign government and they murdered him. But beyond that, it just proves they have no faith in the American people. They have no faith in their democracy. They have no faith in the system that they created. Because they wouldn't have to go around the world fomenting coups and assassinating leaders around the world if they believed that this shining city on the hill called Washington, D.C., and our democracy and our freedom was a shining example to the rest of the world. The rest of the world looks at us as imperialists, murderers, robbers. So we've got to get it straight in our head. We are going to be lied to over and over and over. I just thought of another thing. My brother from the military, he was talking about the military. For 8 years we've been hearing about Petraeus. What a genius this guy is. What a great leader he was. He was also a rapist or at least a sexual predator. We know that because that's why he was fired. But not only that, look at the condition of Iraq. What is good about Iraq that General Petraeus did? Not only that is everybody says, oh, the war in Iraq is over. The war in Iraq has never been over. Since 2003, we have had over 5,000, 10,000, 100,000 military personnel in that place. A contractor gets killed. Has anyone heard his name? Has anyone heard what he did? CNN, those guys that go out there and investigate. I'm probably sure we're only going to hear about this guy from Intercept because these guys don't do any reporting at all. So I'm just going to say, don't believe the hype, don't believe the lies, and use your critical thinking brain because they're already pushing this thought that Iran was responsible for 9/11. That is on CNN, folks. Saudi Arabia, who actually murdered somebody in an embassy in Istanbul. There's no question about it. Even though people are going to be beheaded under their justice system, they were the ones involved in 9/11. We all know that. There's ample proof. And now we're going to get fed this bullshit. And remember that marginal minority leader in the Bush administration, Secretary of State Colin Powell, whose history has been ruined by his lies in the United Nations. That man could have been the first black first black president before Barack Obama. But he lied and he fell apart from those lies. Let's not live those lies again. I say no more lies.
We could get a nice group picture before we perhaps head out towards the street to hold some signs and do some chanting for the general public to see and hear us before we head out. So if folks would not mind perhaps gathering towards the middle here, and then we can head out towards the street and hold our banners. Alright, and as we're doing this, since we are all together, we have Marty from Raging Grannies, who's going to lead us in song. A great way to get us on towards the street.
You know song. We shall not be moved. All right? We shall not pay for endless wars. We shall not pay for endless wars. We'll pay for jobs and health and education, not for endless wars. Run. We don't want Trump bombing Iraq. We should tell all the president at whitehouse.gov. No more endless wars. Congress work on new jobs, not for endless wars. Work on immigration, not for endless wars. We want to work on opportunities at home. No more endless wars. Let's all work together, home from endless wars. Let's all work together, home from endless wars. We should bring all the troops home from those wars right now. No more endless wars. No more endless wars.
Oh, it's inside that brown.
Anybody else not signed
Sign, please. Future you. Unless you're going to get Broward. Anybody's going to Broward.
Yeah, but they're like, no, but there's an event yeah, I know.
Thanks for coming down.
Is by the connector. Maybe so. Very connector. At 7 making deals with not only India, they work with Russia, and then what's been happening this year, there's more ways. But she's on like her, I ran about back. I have to hope gotta think, we're training, basic training stuff. I got in trouble because there was a kid, a little boy that asked me for a gun, and I needed fire, and then my group started to yell at me. Fire, I'm saying you're like me, he has a gun, but he just killed his dad now. He doesn't know why, he doesn't either. And he don't know why we're doing this, why we're doing it. There was no preaching about, we're just preaching clear, but there was no preaching about this is why we're occurring, this is the first after, this is why we're doing it. It was, you point a gun. You go kill that person. After a while, you start to realize that it is that means no. Killing it, it's a people who kill it. These here. Kill it, right? It might honestly be first. Over there, you knew you had all the power. You could have disobeyed that order. You could have done something necessarily haven't convinced you to do so. As far as my family, my friends, another gentleman, one of my best friends,
My job easy, bro. I guess JDP, and I say I guess I'm not Jewish myself. I feel like I'm engaged in cultural appropriation, possibly even religious appropriation.
All right, people, so we are wrapping up this protest here in Miami. Medea said there are actually going to be more. If you are in the Broward County or Fort Lauderdale area and you did not get a chance to participate in this protest, there is another protest happening in Broward, Fort Lauderdale, downtown at 3 p.m. Eastern. So if you did not get the protest here in Miami, downtown Miami, you can definitely go to Broward County and Fort Lauderdale and protest there. Other than that, ladies and gentlemen, thank you all so much for tuning into this live stream special report here on the MCSC Network. And always remember, more than anything else, find your balance.